Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name's Owen, and my pronouns are he, him, or they, them, and I'm this morning's worship associate. We gather in worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion. So whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad that you're here. If today's your first time with us, we'd love to get to know you. Right after service, you're invited to our welcoming room, which is located at the south entrance. And if you're online, the link to our visitor form is being dropped into the chat right now. You can use your phone to access a copy of our order of service by scanning the QR codes that are scattered throughout the building. We also have a few large print paper copies that you can get from our ushers. There, you'll find the names and authors and composers. You'll find the text to choir anthems and resources used in our service. So now, let's take the next few minutes to greet our neighbors, especially those that we don't know yet. Today we're going to light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with words from Rosa Parks. To bring about change, you must be afraid to not take the first step. We will only truly fail when we fail to try. Thank you, Jackson. And now, let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. Thank you.
So today, UU congregations are grappling with a change to dismantle white supremacy in ourselves, in our communities, and in our world. So in February here at UUCE, we hosted a book discussion of the UUA Common Read book, Mistakes and Miracles, Congregations on the Road to Multiculturalism by Nancy Palmer Jones and Karin Lynn. We find ourselves receiving its report with a changed spirit and an urgent need for multiculturalism and anti-racism work in our congregations and in our movement. What are the common threads among congregations in the Unitarian Universalist Association that have entered into this anti-racism and multiculturalism solidarity work? What is in our church's DNA as we continue this work here in our congregation and our wider community around us? We must look at our churches and our community's history as we look to dismantle systems of oppression. So today, you are invited to engage deeply with some of the themes that our book discussion group in February started to discuss. The conversations on these themes are ongoing. So let us continue to foster a community that is committed to this multicultural solidarity work together. Come, let us worship together this morning. At any point during our service, you may write your joys and sorrows in our book, light a candle, or place a stone in the water. And it's over there in the table in the south corner. Those joining from home on Zoom can write prayers of joy and sorrow in the Zoom chat, which will be open until the start of the sermon. Ministerial staff will check those entries and, as appropriate, follow up. And during the week, anyone can go to our pastoral care portal on our website to let our ministers or lay pastoral associates know that you need some support. So this morning, as we enter a time of meditation, and as news rolls in each day with new attacks on our trans loved ones throughout our country and instituted by our governments, we lift up the fears and concerns of our trans siblings and children and youth, and we make a commitment together to continue the fight for basic human rights for all, no matter your gender or sexual orientation status. We stand side by side because we are called to show up for one another, because we are the people of love. So now let us hear these meditation words on courage from Maureen Killeran. I pray this day for the courage to be. The courage to be humble in the face of inequity and pain. To know that power has been given to me to make a difference, although not to end all suffering or to save all the whales that populate our days. I pray for the courage of endurance, to keep acting in the midst of despair, to keep trying in the aftermath of failure, to keep hoping in the emptiness that follows loss or change. May courage give me patience, and may I ever know love's healing presence at the heart and center of my days. May it be so. And now, breathe in peace and breathe out love. When was the first time you knew that racism existed? For Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC folks here today, it probably was a lot earlier in your life when you experienced racism, prejudice, and/or discrimination. For white folks here today, it was probably a lot later in your life that you found out racism existed, since you would have had the privilege of not experiencing racism early on. We start here with this question because in this multicultural work of building the beloved community, the community where all souls are welcomed as blessings and the human family lives reconciled, in this multicultural work, as we build towards this community, we must first place ourselves and recognize where our stories start. We place ourselves within our personal stories, and then we ask, what is the story of our Unitarian Universalist community, and what is in this church's DNA? This is personal and communal work. And I will come back to this question in a bit, but first, we need to define some terms so we are all on the same page when talking about issues of racism, anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multicultural solidarity work. I would like to say that these definitions come from the Mistakes and Miracles book right here that you all should check out if you haven't already. The authors, Nancy Palmer Jones and Karin Lynn, acknowledge that language is ever evolving and that no word is going to mean necessarily the same thing for every person. Yet, as we communicate about these very important and vulnerable topics, we must have a common grounding of language to help us communicate effectively. So race. Let's define that term. Race is a social construct. Biologically, there is only one race, the human race. Yet, the white supremacy culture that we exist in uses race to construct hierarchies based on skin color, country of origin, and other attributes. Racism, in this context, is a combination of prejudice based on race or ethnicity and the power to make decisions and access resources. Multiculturalism can be defined as a situation in which all the different cultural or racial groups in a society have equal rights and opportunities, and none is ignored or regarded as unimportant. Intersectionality is also a term that is worth defining. Intersectionality realizes that people and groups may be targeted by more than one system of oppression on the basis of many aspects of their identity. Ableism, classism, heterosexism, cis-heteropatriarchy, transphobia, and other hierarchical systems amplify the impact of racism and white supremacy culture for those whose identities and life experiences place them in more than one targeted group. So now that we've defined some terms, let's go back to the question I had asked us in the beginning. When was the first time you knew that racism existed? To ask the same question using the definition of racism we just defined, we could state, when was the first time you knew that prejudice based on race or ethnicity was combined with the power to make decisions and access resources? Maybe you first experienced racism as a kid that was prejudice or discrimination based on race or ethnicity. Maybe you read about or were educated how prejudice combined with power to make decisions are tied together in our country and elsewhere in the world. Maybe you had a family or friend who experienced, a family member or friend who experienced racism, and this is how you found out racism existed. So these are really vulnerable questions, right? And I want to make it clear that if any of this is triggering for you today, please make sure to take care of yourself and know that we do have lay pastoral associates here in the building, and you can meet with them or myself or Rev Jen at any point to talk through anything that came up during today's service. So please reach out if this is triggering. The only place I can start on this journey towards building a truly multicultural community is with my story, and when I realized racism existed. My story starts on the border of Mexico and the US. I, being a white female, never had to worry about racism. In college, I decided to study on the border of the US and Mexico with an organization called Border Links in Tucson, Arizona, based in Tucson, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. Border Links' mission is to connect divided communities, raise awareness about the impact of the border and immigration policies, and inspire action for social transformation. They do this through dynamic, immersive, experiential opportunities that explore the difficulties of migration and life along the US-Mexican border. And it was during this semester I found out systemic racism existed I knew racism existed on a level of discrimination before this semester, yet I never realized before this semester how deep the roots of racism go. I was studying with a group of 8 other college kids, and we took our first trip to the border, US-Mexico border, in our big white 15-passenger van. I had heard of the injustices happening on the border before arriving to Tucson, which included Latinx people being racially profiled at the border and at immigration checkpoints along highways near the border. So that was one way. Another way was a group of people called the Samaritans putting out giant blue water tanks in the desert for migrants, only to find that Border Patrol had emptied those tanks. Another injustice. And another injustice of people in the US being put on trial for helping a dying migrant in the desert. Hearing these stories made me super angry and prompted me to want to find out more so I could hopefully help in some way to change the system that was causing these injustices to happen. And this is why I chose to study on the border. So our trip down to the border, you couldn't help but notice how inhospitable the desert environment is, and many of you know this, have been there. What would push people so far to have to leave their country and walk through a desert in order to hopefully create a better life? I would find out later that the answer is systemic racism and economic oppression. Traveling closer to the border, we arrive in Nogales, Arizona. The cities on both sides of the border are named Ambos Nogales, both Nogaleses. They are sister cities divided by a border wall. And as we get closer to the wall, I saw on the hilltops on the Arizona side big mansions. And as I looked out to the Mexico side of the border, I saw cardboard and particle board shacks littered along the border wall. The veil of my lily white world was lifted. Literally, when I saw how stark this contrast was along the border. This image of the mansions overlooking people of another ethnicity or country of origin living in poverty is the epitome of systemic racism and economic racism and oppression. The questions in my head were swirling. How is this just? How can those mansions look out over on this view and not do something about it? What oppressive systems are in place that are creating this reality? Why does this wall even need to be here? How do we create bridges between countries and people? And how can we knock down this ugly wall? How can we help create sustainable housing for people everywhere? Why, in a world of so much wealth, does poverty even exist? This is where my eyes were opened to the appalling reality of systemic racism, and I was furious about it. So this book, that's my story. This book, Mistakes and Miracles, presents the stories of UU churches that have committed to the work of multiculturalism, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. And why I shared my personal story is because our personal stories impact the way we show up to this communal work of multiculturalism. How does your personal story and experience of racism affect this UU congregation and how we as a community show up to do this work together. Your answer might be positive, might be negative, might be both. So together as a UU community, we are able to explore the common threads of building a truly multicultural community rooted in our personal and communal stories. This is the work before us. And thank goodness some of these common threads have been outlined for us already in this book. So, again, as a congregation today and into the future, as we continue to embrace multiculturalism, is to, 1, reflect on our own church's story and history while becoming more self and communally aware of how in this book that are already actively involved in this multicultural work. And 3, take action where we can in relation to some of the common thread examples that are present in other UU churches doing this work. Anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism. And today will not be the last. These are ongoing conversations of learning and growing together, because together we will rise. We already have acknowledged the fact that we each have our own stories and experiences we are bringing to the table when discussing multiculturalism and racism. Again, this is why I wanted us all to start exploring our personal stories allows for us all to be more self-aware when we begin discussing on an institutional level issues of racism within our church's DNA, story, and history. Many of you here it would be great at some point for us to have a gathering together that discusses some of that history. There is also this other book, and it is our first 100 years and beyond, a history of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene from 1909 to 2012. So it's missing, 10, 11 years, right? But it's a good I've mentioned the term Sankofa before, and many of you have heard this term, which is a term from the Akan tribe in Ghana in Africa. It is a term that means as we look forward, learning from the past to inform the future. So what is in our church's history and DNA? A lot of you could shout out some answers, I'm sure. There is definitely a lot, and I can mention some of them today, but this deserves more time than a sermon can give. So a few things in the DNA of this congregation that I've noticed. A spirit of generosity, a spirit of caring, hardworking people, very hardworking. Y'all put this church together and renovated the whole building. Also, caring for our planet. Service is a theme. A context of existing in a state that excluded Black people in the Constitution. Being in a community where there was a thriving KKK chapter. Being settlers on the land of the Kalapuye peoples. Being in a place that had a train station stop for gathering Japanese to be sent to internment camps during World War II. Being part of the westward expansion of Unitarianism, which was a strong lay-led fellowship model. The longest settled minister of this church was for 9 years. A lot of minister turnover. Rugged individualism. A commitment to our children and our youth. A commitment to being in Eugene and not outside of the city in the hills. A commitment to the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism that seeks to dismantle racism and oppression in our congregations in order to build the beloved community. A commitment to advocacy for housing, healthcare, and food for all. A commitment to lifelong learning. A commitment to the future of religious professionals in the UUA through a ministerial internship program. A commitment to seeking right relations. A commitment to welcoming new people into the community. A commitment to fun. A commitment to accessibility. A commitment to being a welcoming community for LGBTQ+. A willingness to be creative and flexible. And there's a lot more in this church's history and DNA that I can't even name right now, but this is a start. So talking about the not so great things that have happened in the history of the church is important, and just as important is talking about all the great things that have happened in the history of the church and celebrate those. All of this is part of our church's DNA here. So as we explore this DNA and history, some of the next things we can look at on our road to multiculturalism are the common threads that are pointed out in the book from other UU congregations doing this work. And I will highlight a few of them. There's a lot. So again, check out the book. So some of these common threads are work on the road towards multiculturalism is all about relationships. Relationships, relationships, relationships. This is what we as community members need to be fostering. We need to create spaces for folks to build relationships with one another. Once people get to know one another, this is where the magic and miracles happen. More ideas and perspectives and thoughts are better than one. This is how we learn and grow together. Relationships, as our common threads, can turn abstract philosophical affiliations into real, nuanced, grounded calls to action. Another common thread is leadership must be diverse, committed, and collaborative. We make sure to invite leadership from diverse peoples in our congregation. We can remain open to new ideas as we listen and collaborate with one another. Multicultural is multi-generational. Repeat that after me. Ready? Multicultural is multi-generational. So this means including all ages in this work. And we must intentionally find ways to make this work accessible to all ages and all learning styles and all ability levels. And we have to make it fun. Another common thread is worship that speaks to the heart and centers diverse voices, styles, and cultures. So lifting up and supporting different styles of worship, we must do this even if it isn't your particular style. We support it because for some of our church folks, it is their style, and this is why we show up and support it. Worship is a we thing, not an I thing. Social justice and community engagement is another common thread, which we do a lot of here already, but we must continue to show up. We showed up for our neighbors that were experiencing anti-Semitism. We showed up for the MLK March. We approach the organizations we want to partner with by saying, we are starting this group and we would like to partner with you. Would you like to partner with us? And if you do, what would you like us to do? This might mean doing childcare or washing the dishes or working in a garden. It's whatever that group needs are. And we commit to showing up and doing the work. And another common thread is a willingness to take risks and feel uncomfortable. This is where the mistake making and miracle work happens. We try new things and we make mistakes, and it is messy and there is conflict. Yet we remember we are bound by our covenant, and through this, we can call each other back in when we mess up, because we will mess up. One example of a process being put in place right now in our church is the Committee on Right Relations. These will be the folks that you come to when mistakes in interpersonal relationships in the church have been made. If there is a conflict between people in the church, this committee will help you process the next steps of mediation. Yes, it feels uncomfortable to deal with mistakes and messiness, but knowing it can happen and that we are not perfect, humans allows us the freedom from being fearful about conflict and mistakes. So now knowing some of the common threads that exist between other UU churches working for multiculturalism, what are some areas here at UUCE we are able to start with? Where do we start? One example that is currently underway is the gathering of our Justice Council, who are the people that are the heads of our justice groups and our identity affinity groups. We gathered together at the end of February to commit to intersectionality in our justice work. We gathered together to brainstorm monthly actions that support what our groups are already doing and support other organizations in the community we want to partner with. And so the first action, and I will call y'all to this one, that we will take as a church community that the Challenging Racism group is helping lead is to attend the Sunday, March 26th NAACP Racing to Change Poets in Action event at the Lane County History Museum, which is right down the road. We will not only be able to view the Racing to Change exhibit that has been at the museum about Black history in Oregon and Lane County, but we will also be able to support what the NAACP is already doing. So mark your calendars for March 26th. It's a Sunday at 2 p.m. for this event. And more information will be coming out, so stay tuned. There are many other ways here at UUCE that we can implement some of these common threads. It will take time, but continuing these conversations is key. May we go out today, encouraged in this communal work, to continue building a truly multicultural community. And may you go here today, encouraged to foster dialogue with other members in this church and with staff of how we can continue to engage in this multicultural building work, because together we will rise. May it be so. So let us say together the words of our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now let us continue to engage in this multicultural solidarity work together, because together we will rise. Peace.